You won't believe what happened to me. Imagine waking up to find that the 1,800 acres of land you've owned for years was sold off by the HOA without your consent. Sounds like a bad dream, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. It all started with a routine HOA meeting that quickly turned into a nightmare. The paperwork, the signatures, and the fraudulent sale, everything was a lie. They took my land, and in the blink of an eye, it was gone. But instead of sitting back and letting them get away with it, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Now, you might be wondering, what do you do when they've taken everything you've worked for? Well, I didn't just sit around, I fought back. The system was broken, but I wasn't about to let them win. So, I made a move that they never saw coming. I found a legal way to hit them where it hurts. I sold their homes, the very ones they had been protecting for all these years, and turned that land into the ranch I had always dreamed of. But the story doesn't end there. What I did next will shock you. Stay tuned for part 2, because you won't believe how this saga unfolds. I spent years building my dream on that land. It wasn't just property to me, it was my future. I had big plans, a sustainable ranch, a home for my family, a place where I could finally live off the land and find peace. I had everything figured out until the HOA stepped in. At first, it seemed harmless. They were supposed to maintain the neighborhood, keep things in order. But over time, I started noticing small things, decisions being made without notice, land being altered without permission. It felt off. I remember the day I found out they'd sold my land. It was a phone call from my lawyer. He told me a deed had been transferred, and I was no longer the owner of 1,800 acres of land I had poured my heart and soul into. I was in shock, disbelief really. How could they do that? What gave them the right? It took a while to even get a straight answer. The HOA claimed they had paperwork. They claimed I signed something, but I never did, and no one could explain where the signatures came from. It was clear I wasn't dealing with ordinary people. This wasn't a mistake. It was a full-on scam. But I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I was going to fight back, and when I realized I could do it legally, that's when things got interesting. The next step wasn't just about reclaiming my land. It was about making them pay. As I started digging deeper into the HOA's operations, the more I realized this wasn't just an isolated mistake, it was a pattern, a hidden agenda that ran deep in the heart of the community. The HOA had been making questionable decisions for years, changing rules and seizing land from property owners without them ever noticing. I wasn't the only one they'd swindled, but I was determined to be the one who exposed them. I started talking to neighbors, gathering evidence, and slowly piecing things together. There were whispers about other people who'd lost land, homes, even investments, but no one seemed to want to fight back. They were either too scared or too beaten down by years of HOA control. The power they had was staggering. They controlled everything: construction approvals, property values, maintenance fees, even the local regulations. No one ever questioned them because, well, no one knew how far it all went. But I wasn't going to just roll over. I wasn't alone in this fight. I found a group of like-minded individuals who had been quietly suffering under the same oppressive HOA rules. Together, we decided to take a stand. The first step was reclaiming what was mine, legally. But I knew it wouldn't stop there. The deeper I went, the more dangerous it became. The HOA had some serious connections. Powerful people were involved, and if they caught wind of my plan, I was in real trouble. So, I did what I had to do. I started selling off their homes. But the twist was, every sale was a calculated move, a step closer to something bigger, something that would bring the whole corrupt system crashing down. As the days went by, the tension kept building. The HOA wasn't going to let this go without a fight. I could feel the pressure mounting, but I had already committed. The first few sales were small, quiet, and easy to hide. The buyers were eager to take advantage of the situation, and I wasn't about to back down. But every deal felt like I was getting closer to a line I couldn't uncross. I knew the HOA had eyes everywhere, And if they found out what I was doing, there'd be no turning back. I could feel the storm coming. The more properties I sold, the more aggressive they became. I started getting threatening calls, strange people showing up around the neighborhood, and mysterious letters that made it clear I was being watched. It was like they were circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then came the meeting. The one I knew was inevitable. The HOA called an emergency assembly, and I could sense the air growing thick with tension. I had been invited, of course, but this time, it wasn't for the usual business. They were onto me. They knew what I was doing, and they were going to make their move. What scared me the most wasn't the threats, though. It was the feeling that they had already anticipated everything. They had their own plan to stop me, and I was starting to realize that I might be walking into a trap. I had to act fast, but the more I thought about it, the more it became clear. There was no easy way out. I was in too deep now. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and I walked in, trying to keep my composure. Everyone seemed to be eyeing me with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. As soon as I took my seat, the head of the HOA, a man named Richard, stood up. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We've noticed some unusual activity, and we're here to clear things up," he said, glancing my way. It felt like the entire room was waiting for me to crack. But before I could even speak, a voice from the back called out, "What about the deeds? The land sales? Who's been behind it all?" It was one of my neighbors, a guy named Tom who had been helping me gather information. The whole room turned to him, and suddenly, I realized this was bigger than I thought. Richard didn't flinch. He just stood there, his gaze cold and calculating. "I think it's time we let the truth come out," he said, motioning to someone behind him. Then, the unexpected happened. A large envelope was passed to me. Inside was something that made my heart drop, a copy of a legal document I never expected to see. It was a contract, not for the land I thought they'd sold, but for the ranch I was planning to build. They had been tracking my every move. They knew what I was doing all along. The worst part, Richard wasn't just the head of the HOA. He was also one of the buyers, and he wasn't the only one. The whole board had been working together, preparing to buy up the land I was selling for pennies on the dollar. I had been played, and now they were making their move to take everything back. My heart pounded as I stared at the document in my hands, trying to process what it meant. They had been playing me from the start. Richard and the entire HOA board were not just trying to steal my land. They were trying to take control of everything I had been building. Every step I'd taken, every sale I'd made, had been anticipated and manipulated by them. But instead of backing down, I leaned in. "I know what you're trying to do," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "You've been plotting this for years, haven't you?" The room grew silent, all eyes on Richard. I could see the sweat starting to bead on his forehead, but he wasn't backing down. He smiled coldly. "Don't you understand? This isn't just about your land. It's about control. We've been doing this for decades. This land was always meant to be ours, and you're just the latest pawn in the game." His words hung in the air like a weight I couldn't lift. The realization hit me. This wasn't about the land anymore. It was about something far bigger. Just as Richard was about to call for a vote to officially claim my property, something strange happened. One of the board members, a woman named Laura, stood up. "Wait," she said, looking at Richard with an expression I hadn't expected. "I can't be part of this anymore." The entire room went dead silent. She pulled out a stack of papers, documents proving everything. The fraud, the manipulation, the hidden deals. She had been keeping track of the HOA's illegal actions for months, and now she was turning on them. In that moment, I realized that Laura wasn't the only one who had been watching. Someone else had been keeping tabs on Richard and the board all along, someone with more power and resources than they could ever anticipate. As she handed me the stack of documents, I saw her smile and then felt my phone buzz in my pocket. A message from my lawyer. The authorities are on their way. The room erupted in chaos, but it was too late. The truth was out. Richard and his board were arrested within hours, and the land was returned to its rightful owners. But there was one last thing that left me speechless. As the dust settled, I found out that Laura wasn't just a whistleblower. She was an undercover investigator sent by a group of investors who had been tracking the HOA's illegal activities for years. And the best part, they had been waiting for the right moment to take them down, using me as the final piece in their plan. I had won, but the game was far from over. And as the dust settled, I couldn't help but wonder who else had been watching. In the weeks that followed, things started to settle down, but the ripple effect of the HOA scandal was far-reaching. Richard and the rest of the board were charged with a long list of crimes, fraud, conspiracy, and more, and the community started to rebuild. People were finally starting to see the truth about the corruption that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The ranch I'd dreamed of building was now a reality, but not without the hard lessons learned from the fight. Laura, the undercover investigator, became a close ally, and together we worked to ensure that the HOA could never regain the control it once had. She introduced me to a network of others who had been wronged by similar organizations, and together we formed a new kind of community, one where fairness, transparency, and trust were at the heart of everything. As for me, I built the ranch I always envisioned, but now with a deeper appreciation for the power of standing up against corruption. I learned that sometimes the system is broken, and you have to fight back to make things right. It wasn't just about reclaiming my land, it was about reclaiming what was rightfully ours, our voice, our power, and our future. And in the end, I realized the real victory wasn't just about winning. It was about knowing that we, the people, still had the power to change the world.